as you can already see here on the screen, I have the pleasure to hand over the mic to Mr. Eelke Wailinga. I hope the pronunciation was right now. And Mr. Wailinga, first of all, will give you kind of food for thought on networks, what is networking all about, and what makes networks work and what not. Mr. Wailinga.
Thank you. I admire networkers. I think about networks, write about networks, do research about networks, but I always am impressed by people who really are effective networkers. But if I ask those networkers, and I work a lot with them, what do you do actually to make a difference? They don't know, they cannot tell. So I focus on, let's say, language and concepts to reflect on what really matters in networks. Not to say how you should network, because I think many of you are much better in doing so than I do, but more to reflect on what really matters. Now, let me see. If I have a little bit more time, the time schedule is very short, so then I would have asked you to buzz a little bit about these two questions here. Just in your own mind, if I ask you, what generates energy in a network that's important for you, I guess you have images. Some networks generate energy, then everybody gets enthusiastic. And if there is energy in the network, lots of things become possible. On the other hand, some networks drain your energy away as well. You recognize that, yeah. So it's interesting to focus on energy. That's actually quite peculiar that we never do. Now, since GFRAS is asking for evidence-based approaches, I would like to take you along through three experiences that more or less have formed my own thinking about networks. Then I would like to give you some language, some ideas about it, and then end up with questions you can take along in the World Government. Now, my first experience is in the Dutch agricultural system. I'm a student of Professor Anne van der Baan. He sent me to Africa to put up a curriculum on extension education in Benin. When I came back, I got a job at the Ministry of Agriculture at the Policy Unit for Agricultural Extension. And that was in the time that it was still a public service. So this was its first green spot there in the timeline. My job was international cooperation, so I had to tell and explain very often to foreigners how our beautiful, effective knowledge system was functioning. Then in 1990, the executive service was privatized. My job was not interesting anymore. I was sent to the Philippines. And when I came back, everything had changed. And I said, well, but you're forgetting something important. So I proposed to write a PhD study about the changing role of government in the knowledge system. I succeeded in 2001, and these are the things I learned there. First, networks have been crucial in the old days. And they still were, and they still are up to now. Second, the intermediate roles, linking the whole system together, were really, really, really important in the old system, and they got neglected in the new system. Nobody had time for it, and in the whole market paradigm, it was said by my colleagues of the government, well, if the market thinks it's important, they will take it over. And they did not. And the third thing, thinking about these networks, I came to the conclusion that healthy networks need a free actor, and there I mean someone who takes the responsibility for himself, or without a mandate, to do whatever is necessary for the network to flourish. I'll come to talk about that later. And it is really very useful to invest in the quality of a network, the knowledge network, because that produces the outcomes you really want to have. Now, the second experience was a few years later when I was asked to join a large-scale experiment in the Netherlands. They had asked farmers to come up with initiatives for innovations not only for their own farm, but also to the benefit of the sector. They could present themselves as a network, at least 3 entrepreneurs. They should come up with a good idea. And then they got assistance for 1 to 2 years by a technician, by a researcher from out in the university, or later on also advisors. We did some 50 networks a year, just imagine, that's quite a lot, with 35 facilitators. And after 3.5 years, we had assistance on 120 networks. And I can tell you then you have quite a lot of experiences documented. It was quite successful, I must say, because since then there's a regular subsidy arrangement in the Netherlands for such networks, and they're now considering the next stage up to 2020. Now, the thing we learned in that program were that it is a useful approach to really focus on networks at farm level. But in the peer-to-peer consultations I organized with the facilitators, we came to the conclusion that project management principles do not apply for networks. They just were without any tools. So we started to make tools for what really helped them to facilitate those networks, and that became the free actors in networks approach. The third experience was, a few years later again, in North-South cooperation. We asked 5 NGOs, internationally operating NGOs, to join us, and they delegated 1 or 2 persons for the core group, hopefully free actors. We made a timeline in every NGO all around the world, and then we brought these core persons together in a workshop, giving them the tools and the language so that they could talk with each other about the really method, and then we guided them for 1 year. And then we got them together in a right shop just to come to conclusions. Now, one conclusion that was really striking there was, and that's what you will recognize, I think, the source of energy that was inspiring the network to start in the first place, that got lost quite quickly when it became an organization striving for income generation, for fundraising, for whatever, and chasing the members for their contributions. So in one way or the energy from the beginning, they dropped it. It was lost somewhere around the track. During this program, they realized they had to get back to these sources of energy in the first place. The second lesson we learned that was for them, the free actor concept was actually a kind of liberating concept. They said, yeah, actually the things that appear so important now, we did it already. Only partly in the subversive, as if it was not allowed for because it was not in our mandate. But now we learn that these things were important because sometimes you have to draw beyond the lines. Okay, now what is the difference between organization and networks? We all know how we have to organize a project. You should have a mission, and then you formulate smart formulated targets, of course. Then you choose your instruments and work frames and all those kind of things. You formulate the competences, you try to get people you need, and of course you need also performance indicators, and then you hope that the people are going to do what you're supposed to do, and then you make change. Right? Piece of cake for everybody, no? But it doesn't work for networks. So we learned that we have to turn it around and start with the people. So how does a network work? You should start with the people. People have dreams, they have ambitions, and when they talk about ambitions together and they discover that they have something in common, so if they make a connection, then you will see that there's energy. Because if we share a dream, probably the dream comes closer. And then you will see that they start to make plans, they make targets, and finally you get a shared mission. So it's just the other way around as what we always have said. So the organization part is what I call the cold process, and the other part is the warm process. So it matters to make a difference between what you're talking about, the warm or the cold process. A shared mission is not the start of the process, but the result of it. People make it ambitious, make it flow, but structure provides the belly. So they need each other. So I'm not saying that what we always have learned is nonsense. But they need each other. Only the warm process comes first, and then you get the cold process. And the trouble in the way we are organizing our processes and financing it is that you are supposed to do the warm process on your own energy and with your own funds and with your own possibilities, and you only get the money if you are ready and you have drawn up the blue program. Now, just to give you a little bit idea of the way you can think about this. We developed a whole toolbox. Well, I'm not going to explore about this because we have a very short time. But this is just to impress you a little bit, you know, to make you curious. But I just explain one of the models a little bit further. That's what we call the triangle of co-creation. As I said, new movement always starts with people with ambitions, the initiators. But sooner or later they need also the managers, the people who hold the door, can open doors and close them. And they provide the conditions actually for suppliers to come in with their knowledge, with their skills, with their possibilities, etc., etc. So actually these three role players, they need each other to come to co-creation. But as you all know, this is not as easy as I'm telling it now, because you have to overcome quite a lot of suspicion. And this is how it works. The managers actually are always they have the suspicion on their head of being actually a gatekeeper, not being interested in the movement, but only keeping their power position. Suppliers, they have the suspicion of being actually survivors, only in it for the money. And initiators, they have the suspicion of being activators, activists, not interested in structure, actually activists like to see the structure double down earlier today than tomorrow. Now, how to overcome this suspicion if you are a suspect yourself? Well, that's why you need a free actor who is less suspect himself or herself, because maybe he has no vested interest, maybe because of personality, maybe because of his history, maybe because of the possibility he or she has. So this is why this free actor is so important. Before you really have a structure in which the mandates are clear and compatible with each other, you need someone to link the whole thing together. Now, the trouble is that we ignore them. So the trouble is that in the way we finance programs and conceptualize programs, we only see the managers and the suppliers. The financiers, they position themselves as the managers, saying, well, this is our shopping list, this is what you have to do, and all the others, they find themselves back in the supplying world, and actually, eventually, they become survivors, only striving for getting the next ton. And that's because the initiators are left out. And what happens then, that there's also no room for free actors anymore. So, I'm at the end of my short presentation, so I would like to give you a few questions along for your World Cafe this afternoon, or later this morning. So, if you now consider your network or sub-network under GFRAS, what is actually the source of energy there? What generates energy? And the second question, who is in the position to play the free actor role? And what would you like to be done for making the network better? Well, we're not going to discuss it now, but that's for the World Cafe. And remember, if there's energy in the network, everything becomes possible. I thank you for your attention.